I've had a lot of really cool opportunities over the past 13 years in my business. One of the coolest ones that I've been able to take on has been the production of the UESAKA weightlifting belt. This thing has been in production since the 1960s, and I have taken over production of this thing for the last 3 years. I think the production process is really cool, so I'm going to take you guys through it. Hope you guys enjoy the video. So we got 2 pieces of leather here. This one's going to be a custom cut, meaning that the sizing is going to be custom. We're cutting an entire length of 108 centimeters, so we have enough distance on both of these pieces. But what I am looking for on the UESAKA belt is, because only the rear brace is going to be lined or doubled up, everything else needs to be quite thick. And this is going to be the thicker piece by a bit. This is about 5 mils. This is about 5.5, maybe 6. So I'm going to go with this guy. I'm going to set us to about right there. Dink. I'm going to get out the square, mark this off. Ooh, that's sharp. These are all of my UESAKA belt patterns. So we're going to look through here. So this is the buckle end. This is the stitching pattern for the back. Here's the shape of the back. And this is going to be the billet end. Next, we're going to slice up some belt loops. Belt loops are going to be 20 millimeters wide. So I set up my cutter here for that width. It's going to spit us out this. That should be enough, but just in case. That's a good one. All right, so these guys are really thick, 6.5 millimeters, which is just a lot. We're gonna split that down to about 4.5. This is called a crank splitter. It pushes the leather into a blade. This is still 5.2, so we gotta bring it down a little bit more than that. Belt loops are 170 mils long, so we're going to mark this and this and this. I'm going to chop everything up. Then we're going to put our decorative gauge or gouge, I know words, onto both sides of each, like that. Now the UESAKA belt standard that I've been making is a double prong. So instead of just one punch in the center here, this is the buckle end. Instead of one punch, there would be 2. But the single prong is really popular. All of my customers in Japan are ordering the single prong almost exclusively. So we're going to mark up this pattern. All the holes here are 4, 5, and 6 millimeters in diameter. The small ones back here, these are 4s. I'm using the KS blade punches. These ones back here are 5. And the main hole is 6. For the double prong, I have actually a clicker die that punches all of this out. But for the single, I still have to do it by hand. And again, on our standard double prong, I've got dies that are going to punch out all those holes. But in the single prong variant, I'm going to have to do this all by hand, and I don't mind. It's quite fun. I am a big believer that on thick belts, we need to use oblong or egg-shaped holes, because round holes, they just get blown out. They stretch quite a bit. So I use my custom oblong made punch by Kevin Lee, and here we go. I'm going to scratch out the end shape, like that. And then I'm just going to scratch out the position of each one of these notches. And we have already set our crank splitter to about 4.5 millimeters thick. So what we're going to do is we're just going to feed the buckle end in. So we're about there, right? Oh, beautiful. Come back out. Nice. Okay, so now we've made a split like this, and we're going to slice this off. The way that we're going to slice off this excess is with a French edger. It's just a really flat knife, basically. So we're going to pull this really hard back, and then we're going to go in nice and smooth all the way. Perfect. So we've got our stitching pattern here. I'm just going to line this up right here. And within this diamond, we're going to have the UESAKA logo. Dink! So for the back brace, we're going to go 220 mils wide and 100 mils tall. So it's just going to be the same height as the belt itself. We're making this out of 4 millimeter thick vegetable tan leather. So it's going to match nicely. Nice. My belt loops are going to be skived on the ends right here and here so that they can overlap, lay on top of each other, and then I'm going to rivet that shut. And on the back brace, you can't just have like, you know, this stubby cut. We're going to skive this down so that there's a nice clean transition on the inside of the back brace like that. So we're over at the skiving machine here. It needs to be placed in such a way that I get a nice taper out of all of my work. So right about there looks good. Right about that looks good. Honestly, I eyeball a lot of these things now. I need to make sure that it's sharp. Nice, there we go. So as you can see here, we now have skived ends. So when I flip this over, those two layers can meet, and then I can shove a rivet right in between them. So we're going to back this plate up a little bit, lower that a smidge. Let's see what that does for us. Way better, right? So it looks like that now, really thinned out. So we're gonna start applying some glue now. If you guys have seen the belt, you'll know that the back is basically glued on a radius. So the belt doesn't lie flat like this. It's more like this. So we need to basically glue that back piece, this back piece inside, it's gonna be glued on a radius. So I've got a whole barrel thing for that. So I'm just gonna mark my glue lines, which is basically where my stitches go. Okay, like this and like this. And like this. So I know that these two lines is where the stitches are on the front side. So I know that my glue line needs to go beyond that stitch line by a little. And this back piece itself is cut to the length of between the stitch lines. However, because we are gluing it on a radius, this inside piece will not just lie at the stitch line. It'll actually be bitten by the stitch line. As we curl, you see that? As we curl, the stitch line is going to grab this inside piece, and it's going to hold that edge down. For my glue, I use Renya 315. I keep a paintbrush submerged in water. Kick all the water out of the brush. And then I apply with a paintbrush that never actually gets gummy or hard, because this glue itself is water-based. So all you have to do is keep the brush submerged in water, and it will never dry and it will never gum up. Well, not never. I basically use a new brush every 6 months or so. Make sure that our glue reaches the edge and just a little beyond the stitch line, like that. Perfect. Oh my God, it's like he's been doing this for a while. I'm going to apply to the actual back brace itself. When applying glue, you can kind of tell on different leathers. Some leathers are very, very thirsty. So the moment that you apply the glue basically sinks and gets absorbed by the fibers rather than just kind of sitting on top of them, which is what we want. So if your leather is thirsty, you have to apply multiple coats. The first coat will actually suck itself into the leather, and then the second coat is what's going to be sitting on top, drying, and then adhering to the opposing piece. So we need to round out the edges on these belt loops. And I do that with this edge beveler. This is from Oka Tools, but it is highly modified to my specifications. Because these belt loops, we're going to be skiving the back sides of them. And the back sides don't really like to skive. So when you push, it really tends to mold the piece, and it kind of loses its shape, and it gets kind of dangerous because basically this little thing can hop off and then stab your finger. So I like to get a wooden board, just tighten it up to the edge of the table, butt up the piece against the wood, and then like that, you remove the back sides. Front side's always much nicer and much easier to do. I don't do a lot of customizations on these belts because I don't think that I should, right? It's not really my design, but I do names on the belt loops. So in this case, he wants his first initial and his last name in black freehand on the belt loop itself. So that's next. Sometimes I use a marker. If it's got a stronger, a newish tip on it, then I can get that nice kind of brush stroke look to it. Unfortunately, I do not. I've ran out, and there's just not enough ink in this one. So the other way to get that brush stroke effect is to use a brush. Yeah, and when I'm working on natural leathers, you kind of have two options. You can use a dye or you can use a paint. Paint sits on top of the leather and it adheres to the leather, whereas dye actually sinks into the leather. It's like a watercolor. So the dye can't be rubbed off, can't scratch off, anything like that. So yeah, I'm just gonna practice here, see what happens. After fucking around a lot, I kind of found the font, the style, the weight that I'm happy with. So let's do some painting. Nice. Very happy with that. So we're now going to adhere the back piece to its position on the belt. And in order to do that, I've made this thing. It's a barrel, and it just happens to be the perfect radii that is required for this. So this glue needs to be applied and then dried in order to get really good adhesion. So it's now dry. I'm going to stick this guy about right yonder. Or is it hither? So I basically adhered the two ends into their position so that I know for sure the stitch line is going to bite both sides. Okay? And now I'm just going to place it here, right in the center, round it out like that. Now we have an arched back. I'm gonna give it a roll to really secure its position and just carry this bad boy forward. And let's party. Nice and slow to make sure that I'm not gonna stitch over the logo. That would be stupid. Turn. There. Good. Once in there. Once in there. And we done, baby. Wow. Nice. There are a lot of small details from fine leather work that I apply into my craft here. And one of them is simple. It's just banging your stitches down. Banging your stitches down flattens the thread and also closes the stitch hole that's made by the machine and becomes a lot better looking, you know? Now, one really cool thing about the original UESAKA belts that I have that I've copied into some of my own work is a chamfered edge. So on the back here, you're looking at like a pretty thick piece of leather, right? I think this is, yeah, it's over 10 millimeters thick, so I won't even go in the gauge. So it's probably 11 millimeters thick. Now, what the original craftsman did is that he actually chamfered this back edge down. So instead of having 100 millimeters width, kind of pressing into your back, it was like maybe more so like 90 millimeters. So that edge back here, it was actually chamfered inwards and on the bottom as well. And I love that detail. It has a really cool feeling on your back. And yeah, I've kept it going. So the way that we get that chamfer is with a leather planer. It looks exactly like a wooden planer, but it's just used for leather. I'm gonna apply a little bit of pressure and just start shaving away this edge. I'm gonna keep going until I start seeing the outside leather. And then I basically just go by feel. Creates all this spaghetti. But now you guys can see, this is the original edge unchamfered. This is the new edge, chamfered. It's got this slope on it. Really cool detail. So now you can see we have an effective inside width on this back brace, about 90 millimeters. Okay, now it's time for the most daunting portion, I guess, of this product, and that is painting the edges red. Now, the original product, I'm not sure if he used a paint. It kind of looked like it was some kind of paint, but I like to use a dye. Dyes actually bleed directly into the leather. They sink into the leather, as I was saying earlier. So I think that over the long term, it produces a result that just holds on a little bit better. But there are no mistakes allowed with dye. You can't fix it. That gets the best penetration of the dye, and then I will burnish afterwards. One thing I like to do is have scrap leather around, because wool absorbs a shitload of dye, almost too much in the beginning. So when you apply, when you get your wool dauber in there, it sucks up so much dye so that the first contact that you make with the leather just sucks out a whole bunch of that dye, and it can be a little bit too much. So you have your scrap leather and you just rub that in a little bit and then you go for it. This will really suck if I screw this up. As I was saying earlier, paint is kind of a little bit more forgiving, whereas dye, there is no fixing dye. If you spill over or whatever, you have to sand it off. Now I'm just going to be burnishing this edge, and on this edge I am applying a mixture of glue and water. Very low ratio of glue inside here, but the glue helps the fibers to bind a little bit more. And this is the same glue pot that I keep my glue brush in. So there's always some amount of glue in here. Give it a little bit of elbow grease. Now I'm going to let this dry before I add the final coat onto the edges, which is a gloss sealant. This will help the edge shine, will make it water resistant, and will keep those fibers compacted tightly.